Week 4 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I would stash entering the weekend before the games play. So now these players are off waivers after the Week 4 waivers came off. And these are some players sitting around on most waiver wires I would stash, and possibly they could be breakout candidates. And you beat everyone in your league instead of spending fab money or wasting a waiver claim. You can have these guys on your team right now that possibly could break out this week and be viable fantasy options. First play is Tutu Atwell of the Los Angeles Rams. Tutu Atwell available right now. 93% of fantasy leagues is Tutu Atwell. So last season he filled in when Cooper Kupp went down. He had 3 solid ball games for fantasy owners. And then obviously Kupp and Puka Nacua, when they were both healthy for this Ram team, there wasn't much of a role for Tutu Atwell. So far in this season, Week 1, he didn't see the field as Atwell. Week 2 with Arizona, 3 catches, 48 yards. In Week 3 versus San Francisco, 4 catches, 93 yards. So Tutu Atwell, a speedy wide receiver, guy could play the slot. And Matthew Stafford, we know he's a deep ball thrower. If Atwell could get behind that secondary of an opposing opponent, he's someone that could have put up fantasy points. And Puka minimums out 2 more weeks. I know he did some light work on the side in practice this week, but he's still a few weeks away. And Cooper Kupp, I know, shed the cast, but still no timetable 100% when he's returning. So if you need a stash option, I think Atwell is a decent one this week. The next player with the same team, Jordan Whittington of the Los Angeles Rams. So Whittington right now available in tons of fantasy leagues. I know he didn't see much last week in the lineup with Cooper Kupp out. Available 96% of fantasy leagues. So him and Demarcus Robinson, they shared the snaps at the Cooper Kupp position in the Sean McVay offense. So 2 weeks of playing time. Week 2 with Arizona, 2 catches, 22 yards. And Week 3 versus San Francisco, 3 catches, 28 yards. So Whittington, a 5th-round pick. He made this team out of training camp. A lot of rave reviews. Sean McVay spoke highly of him in training camp as well. And we'll see this week if he gets more of an expanded role, because if he does, I think he's a receiver that fits the mold. A bigger wide receiver, good hands, and a good route runner. And he reminds people of Puka Nacua a little bit. Obviously, he don't have the talent, but the way he can run his routes and play that position for Sean McVay in this offense. So right now, people dropped the Whittington in a few leagues. Like I said, he didn't do much the last 2 weeks, but another week under his belt possibly could be a breakout and a nice stash. Next stash, Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers. Legette now looks like he's going to be in a prominent role for this Carolina Panther team. Adam Thielen out minimum 4 weeks with a hamstring injury. Legette out there in 88% of fantasy leagues. And so far this season, Week 1 at New Orleans, 4 catches, 35 yards, 7 targets. Week 2, no targets. And then Week 3 with Andy Dalton in the lineup, the football moved down the field and this offense was moving. 2 catches, 42 yards on 3 targets. So Legette, an early draft pick for this Carolina Panther team in the offseason. And I know he's going to get an opportunity. Like I said, I don't believe Jonathan Mingo is going to outsnap him with Adam Thielen out. So Legette, good draft capital on him. And I believe he's going to get an opportunity for this Panther team. So let's say he could go out there and have a decent game and you could stash him right now for nothing. This would be the time to do it, obviously. Next player, Emmanuel Wilson of the Green Bay Packers. Emmanuel Wilson, I've mentioned him a couple times throughout the week. Available right now, 90% of fantasy leagues. And we know Matt LaFleur, he never stuck with one running back. It was always a running back by committee with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon over the last few seasons. And this year was supposed to be Jacobs and Lloyd, but obviously Marshawn Lloyd out on IR with the ankle injury. And Emmanuel Wilson, he saw some touches in the early going. One in London versus Philly, 4 carries, 46 yards, 2 catches, 2 receiving yards. Then Week 2, he was the 3rd string, still saw 5 carries, 9 yards. And then Week 3 at Tennessee, a big game, 12 carries, 50 rush yards, 2 catches, 35 yards, including a 30-yard screen touchdown for Emmanuel Wilson. So last week I know it was garbage time a little bit, but I still believe he could get 8 to 12 touches per week. Josh Jacobs went down. We has to miss a game or 2 here. I think Wilson could be a decent flex option for this season. Now, from fantasy owners, and if you're looking for handcuff upside options, Wilson definitely is one this week. The next stash, Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. The first 2 weeks he didn't see the field was Roschon Johnson. And then last week he got decent playing time with DeAndre Swift and Khalil Herbert. So last season, Johnson showed some flashes. We know he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield for the Chicago Bear team. Available 90% of fantasy leagues. And like I said, last week in Indianapolis, 8 carries, 30 yards, 4 catches, 32 yards on 5 targets. So obviously a young quarterback like Caleb Williams They're trying to simplify the game for him a little more. After the first 2 weeks, he did nothing. And last week, Williams got the ball to Cole Kmet. 10 catches on that one in that game. And then last week, Roschon Johnson looked like the more efficient back as well. So this week in a matchup versus the Los Angeles Rams, I think Johnson is in line for more work. This Ram defense really isn't all that great, I believe. And if you're looking for a potential running back who could be a starter or at least get 50-50 role in his offense at the position, I think Roschon Johnson could be that once again this week and as the weeks go on. Next stash, Calvin Austin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Calvin Austin had a breakout game last week where he had 4 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown, including a 55-yard touchdown in that ball game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Right now available 99% of fantasy leagues. And we know this Pittsburgh Steelers team, they need another option to step up in the passing game. It's pretty much George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and no one else going out there making plays. So Calvin Austin coming off a nice ball game. Like I mentioned, we'll see if the snaps go up in Week 4's game at the Indianapolis Colts. But I definitely would take a flyer on him right now, Calvin Austin, because if he goes out there once again, has another nice performance, then you have to waste some fab money or add him off the waiver wire. So with the snaps going up and Pittsburgh desperately needing another option in the passing game to help out Justin Fields and starting to score more touchdowns and settling for field goals, I like Austin as a stash this week. And the final player I look to stash this week's Tyler Beatty of the Denver Broncos. I mentioned Beatty early in the week on my waiver wire videos, and no one followed up and picked him up off the waiver wire. Available right now in 99% of fantasy leagues. So Tyler Beatty, he out-touched Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin in Week 3. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something. Obviously, it was garbage time in that game where Broncos were up early and often and finished with the 26-7 victory. But Beatty, he looked impressive. Only almost 7 yards per carry in that ball game for Tyler Beatty. So this week, a tough matchup with the New York Jets. One Payton's loved using multiple running backs. And let's be honest, Javonte Williams really hasn't done much this season. And Jaleel McLaughlin, besides that goal line touchdown last week, he's pretty much been non-existent fantasy-wise or helping this Denver Bronco team. So the youngster Beatty also as well got signed officially to the roster from the practice squad. So now he's official member of the 53-man roster. And maybe Sean Payton throws him out there once again in Week 4. And he potentially could be the starting running back as the weeks go on. Or minimum have timeshare 40%, 50% of the touches. So that's a few players I have as stashes for Week 4 of the fantasy football season.